I grew up in church. My father has been pastoring the same church for 9 years now. It's not a massive cathedral, nothing like those glass towers you see in big cities. Ours sits on the edge of a quiet town, tucked between a row of aging shops and a field that never seems to grow anything. The church is painted off-white, though the weather has done its work on it. When the evening sun hits, you can see the paint peeling in small strips, almost like the building itself is tired. Inside, it's the kind of place that carries both warmth and heaviness. Wooden pews, polished so many times they squeak when you shift your weight, hymn books stacked unevenly on the back shelf, and fans that hum endlessly but never seem to push enough air. The smell is always the same, too, a strange mix of candle wax, old wood, and faint dust. My dad sometimes comes home right after Sunday services, if he isn't the one leading the weekly programs. Other times he stays back in the church, especially if he's fasting, praying, or planning something special. That evening, though, around 6:30 p.m., he came home. He looked exhausted. His voice was lower than usual when he greeted me. He sat down slowly, rubbed his eyes, and sighed. Then he told me he forgot something important in his office. His preaching notes, the very ones he had written out by hand for that week. I offered to go pick them up for him. He hesitated, but eventually handed me the car keys. The drive was short, familiar. I've made that trip more times than I can count. The town was settling into its evening rhythm, street lights flickering on, children's laughter fading into distant chatter, and the occasional bark of a stray dog echoing off the road. When I pulled up to the church, the security guard was there, as always. An older man with a bent back, always leaning on his cane more than he wanted people to notice. He was speaking with his brother near the entrance, and when I greeted him, he simply nodded. I told him why I was there, and he waved me on without really paying attention. I didn't go through the main sanctuary doors. Instead, I used the side door, the one that leads directly up to my dad's office. The church felt different that evening. Quiet in a way that pressed into your ears. The kind of quiet where even your own footsteps sound like intrusions. I climbed the short flight of stairs, unlocked my dad's office, and slipped inside. The air smelled faintly of old books and that particular cologne my dad uses, the one that always lingers in the fabric of his jackets. I picked up his notes from the desk, ready to leave. That's when something caught my eye. There's a window in his office that looks down into the main church auditorium. Through it, I noticed a faint glow, a light coming from under one of the chairs. At first, I thought maybe the security guard had forgotten something or maybe it was just a reflection. But the glow flickered. Against my better judgment, I leaned closer. It wasn't just light, it was candlelight. I froze for a moment. Who lights a candle under a chair? Curiosity and unease inside me, eventually I gave in. From my dad's office, there's another door that connects directly into the sanctuary. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the handle. The church auditorium greeted me with its vast stillness. Shadows stretched long across the pews. The candlelight was faint, but steady, flickering under one of the chairs near the front. I walked down slowly, each step echoing. The closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The candle itself was strange. The wax stick had scratches running along its sides, deep, jagged marks that looked almost like they'd been carved by fingernails. A chill crept up my spine. I bent down, blew out the flame, and left the candle where it was. My only thought was preventing a fire accident. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight. That's when it happened. I felt something brush against my leg. It wasn't a solid push, not like someone bumping into you, no. It was softer, like fabric, like the hem of a long dress swaying as someone walked past me. I froze. My throat tightened. I whipped my light around but saw nothing. Nothing but rows of empty chairs staring back at me. Panic whispered at the edges of my mind. I tried to steady myself, telling myself it was just my imagination. Still, I decided to tell the security guard. Maybe someone had slipped in. As I made my way back towards the office to lock up, another sound reached me. Humming. At first, it was faint, low, almost like the hum of the fans, but it grew louder the closer I got to the media unit. It wasn't a tune I recognized, just a soft, mouth-closed humming. I should have walked away, but a part of me thought maybe someone is praying. People do that sometimes, come into the church alone, whisper songs to God in the quiet, and I didn't want to disturb them. So I walked towards the media room, each step careful. The humming grew sharper, clearer. My pulse quickened. I reached to the door. My fingers touched the handle. And then silence. Utter silence. It was as if the entire church had exhaled and then decided not to breathe again. No hum, no sound, nothing. I pulled my hand back. I couldn't open it. I didn't want to. Fear was already crawling down my spine like ice water. I turned to leave. That's when I saw it. By the corridor near the restrooms, under the dim light, a shadow moved. Not a trick of the light, no. It shifted, passed quickly like someone slipping out of sight. I locked my dad's office as fast as I could, my hands shaking against the keys. My only thought was to get out, to get home. I rushed down the stairs, and that's when I ran into him, my father, standing there with the security guard. He looked worried, almost out of breath. He told me he had taken a cab because he sensed, in his spirit, he said, that I was in danger. I told him everything, the candle, the humming, the brush of cloth against my leg. His expression hardened. We went together to check, but when we reached the spot where I had blown out the candle, there was nothing. No candle. No wax on the floor. Nothing at all. I remember crying quietly on the way home while my dad drove us back. And even now, whenever I close my eyes, I can still feel that fabric brushing against my leg. This is where it gets scarier. I still don't know what it was. Was someone really there? Or did something older, something hidden in those walls, brush against me that night?
I've served in the Lord's house for most of my life, but I'll tell you the truth. There are nights I've wondered if the building itself holds more than just the presence of God. Some things I've seen I can't explain with scripture or reason. This one memory, it clings to me. Every time I stand near the baptism pool, I feel the same cold crawl up my spine. It happened on a Friday night, years ago. We just finished a long service, one of those nights where the prayers stretch on, and even after dismissal, people linger. By the time I finished locking up, the sanctuary was empty. The congregation had gone home. The choir room was silent. The corridors, usually alive with chatter and footsteps, were still. Let me tell you something I learned that night. A church doesn't feel like a church when it's empty. At night, the silence is thick, almost hostile. Every hymn book left on the pew looks abandoned. Every flicker of the sanctuary lights feels deliberate. And when the wooden doors close, they don't sound like doors anymore. They groan, like something waking up. I should have left with the others, but I had one last task. We had baptism scheduled for Sunday morning, and the white robes needed to be folded and set out. That was my duty. I remember carefully arranging them in the small storage room by the pool, stacked, neat, untouched. I even prayed softly as I folded the last one, like I often did. And then just a few minutes later, everything changed. When I stepped back into the room, one of the robes wasn't on the pile anymore. It was floating in the water. I froze. The cloth spread across the pool slowly, rippling outward as though someone had just been submerged and stepped out of it. But there was no one there. No sound of dripping feet on tile, no voice, just stillness and that robe drifting. At first, I told myself it must have slipped in somehow. Maybe I placed it too close to the edge. But here's where it gets scarier. When I leaned over and pulled it from the water, the fabric was ice cold, not damp like normal water, freezing. My hands burned from the chill as I wrung it out. I glanced back at the pile. Every other robe was still folded exactly as I'd left them. And that's when I heard it. A splash. Not behind me. Not from another room. From the pool itself. I whipped around. The water was calm again, flat as glass. But the sound, I know what I heard. Someone had gone under. I remember whispering out loud like a fool, trying to reassure myself. Maybe a pipe, maybe something fell in. But the air was too heavy, the silence too sharp. My voice didn't even sound like my own. I should have walked away. I should have locked the doors and gone home. But curiosity has a way of destroying common sense. I leaned closer to the pool, and I swear on my life, what I saw made my stomach turn. There were shapes beneath the surface, pale, shifting shapes, not reflections, not tricks of light. They looked like robes. No, not robes. Bodies wrapped in robes. Dozens of them. Faces pressed against the underside of the water, staring up. Their eyes were pale, mouths slack, hair drifting in the current that shouldn't have been there. And then one of the faces moved. It pressed harder against the surface as though it trying to rise but couldn't break through. The water stayed sealed, holding it in place. Its eyes, God help me, they rolled upward, locking on mine. I stumbled back, nearly falling. My foot caught on the wet robe I had dropped. When I looked again, the pool was still, empty, not a ripple in sight. But here's the part I've never told anyone, not even my family. When I gathered the courage to drain the pool the next morning, I found something at the bottom. Another robe, folded, neatly, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. I never told the congregation. I couldn't. What would I even say? That the baptism waters we consecrate for new life might also hold something else? That in the same place we declare people reborn, there are shadows lingering, watching, waiting? To this day, I don't stay near that pool after dark. I leave the robes folded by the door, not inside the room. And whenever we do baptisms, I can't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, one of those pale faces will break the surface before the service ends.
Everyone thinks a church is a place of sanctuary, a place where the light of God keeps the dark at bay. After some years of cleaning mine at night, I know that's a lie. The darkness doesn't stay outside. It just
waits for you to be alone. You feel it in the air, not as cold or heavy, but as a total, impossible stillness. I've been part of my parish my whole life, but for the past few years, I've worked as the church cleaner. It's not glamorous, sweeping the aisles, polishing brass, emptying bins, but I took the job because I loved the church, or at least I thought I did. The thing about churches is this: most people only ever see them full of life. Sunday mornings, incense still hanging in the air, organ music humming in the rafters, children fidgeting in pews while parents shush them. That's the church people know. But I know it in silence. I know it when the last person has left, when the candles are snuffed out, when the only sound is my mop dragging across the tiles. And let me tell you, silence changes a place. At first, I thought I was just adjusting to the job. The building is old, stone walls that breathe cold even in summer, wooden doors that groan when you push them, stained glass that catches the moonlight in colors that don't feel holy at all. But over time, the silence began to feel less like peace and more like pressure, like something was watching. It started small. One night, I was wiping down the pews near the altar when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I spun around, expecting a priest had returned, but the pews were empty. The doors were locked. It was just me. Another time, I stacked hymnals neatly on the front pew. When I circled back minutes later, they were scattered across the benches, some even lying open on the floor. No one had come in. A rosary gave me the worst fright. I had found it left behind one Sunday and set it on the lost and found table by the sacristy. The next evening, it was back in the pew where I'd first picked it up. I thought maybe someone had reclaimed it and lost it again, but it happened 3 nights in a row. I'd move it, and it would return. And the confirmation. God help me. The confirmation. That booth hasn't been used in years, but as I dusted around it, I heard whispers inside. Faint, hurried, like someone spilling secrets. I pressed my ear to the door once. There was nothing, just the stale air of a place no one had stepped into in ages. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? If I stood up during Mass and said, "I think the church is haunted," people would laugh me out of the building, or worse, pity me. And besides, I had no proof, just these small, unsettling moments. But here's where it gets scarier. It was a Sunday morning like any other. The church was packed, sunlight spilling through the stained glass in sharp beams of color. I sat in my usual pew, envelope ready in my hand for the offering. When it was my row's turn, I walked up slowly, bowed my head, and slipped my hand into the velvet bag. And then I felt it. Something inside closed over my fingers. Not the smooth brush of paper, not the edge of another envelope. A hand, an old hand, thin, cold, the skin loose and papery like it belonged to someone far too old to still be alive. For a moment I thought maybe the usher was playing some awful trick, but when I looked up, I saw his face. He was staring at me, pale as chalk, his knuckles trembling where he held the pole. He wasn't in the bag. His hands were right there, shaking. The hand inside tightened. It tugged at my envelope. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to pull away. I yanked my hand out so fast, I stumbled backward into the pew. Gasps echoed around me. Some people laughed nervously, thinking I'd made a scene. Others whispered. But the usher, he just stood there, wide-eyed,
lips pressed shut, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. My envelope was gone. We checked later. Every other offering was there, stacked neat as always. But mine? Vanished. Not dropped, not misplaced, just gone. I tried to explain. I stammered out something about a hand in the bag, about how it gripped me. But the more I spoke, the stranger the congregation looked at me. The priest rested a hand on my shoulder and said gently, "Sometimes the mind plays tricks when we're under stress." But I know what I felt. And the usher? He never said a word. Not to me, not to anyone. He avoided me after that day, wouldn't even meet my eyes. And here's the detail I can't shake. When I yanked my hand free, just for one split second, I saw something pale retreat deeper into the folds of velvet. Not an envelope, not paper. Skin. Since then, I can't bring myself to touch the offering bags when I clean the storage room. But I swear, they shift sometimes. Subtle, but enough. Like something inside is breathing. And maybe that's the worst part. Not the hand, not the whispers, not the cold, impossible touch of something that shouldn't be there. The worst part is the silence. The congregation has chosen to pretend it never happened. The usher, the priest, everyone, no one speaks of it. It's like they already knew, like they've known all along.